Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca. On today's episode, I have Miriam Provenzano. Miriam is a licensed therapist who specializes in trauma and chronic pain, and she takes a really integrative approach to healing. She's helping people work through complex trauma and conditions like vulvodynia, and she's here with us today to share some of her insights and her wisdom. Welcome, Miriam.
Thank you, Bianca.
Thank you for being here. I'd love if you could share with the listeners a little bit about yourself and your story. What has led you into this realm of psychology, of working with trauma and chronic pain?
Yeah, sounds good. So I feel since I was a kid, like I was always very sensitive, like a much higher sensitivity maybe than other kids. And I was also a very good listener, which, kind of like already was making me think about going into therapy. But obviously, I didn't know anything about trauma before. And it was not really something that was very much spoken about.
Mm.
But as time went by, kind of like made it very obvious for me that there was something going on. And in my early mid 20s, I developed vulvodynia,
Mhm.
chronic pain. And that was, kind of like a big wake up call of like, there's been a lot of things that I've been not dealing with here that need to be addressed. And I've kind of just been pushing through life. And it is true that at that time, I was already in college and I was going for psychology. But I thought more like I want to help others, but also because, when you feel that you've gone through a lot yourself, like you kind of have that will to want to support others so that they don't have to go through as much pain. But I was not originally expecting to specialize in chronic pain.
To just go back to the diagnosis of vulvodynia. So, for people that have never heard of vulvodynia before, do you just want to explain what it actually is? It's a chronic pain condition, but I'll allow you to explain a little bit about how it presented for you at that time.
Yeah, sure. So basically, kind of one random day, my vulva started burning.
Mm.
And it kind of starts, so I feel always in like the most random way. For me, it was started like after going to the bathroom, but it generally has like a very weird onset. So yeah,
Mm.
it started burning, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. Maybe did I get an infection or something? So for a while, I'm like looking for like responses to kind of like, okay, how do I treat this infection? Why is it not going away? Um, I was in San Diego at that time. Eventually, one of the gynos that had given me some stuff to treat as an infection, he referred me to another gyno that specialized in like more like weird conditions, let's say. So yeah, I went there, and then he is the one that diagnosed me with vulvodynia. And yeah, I was like, what do you mean that I kind of have like a chronic pain and my vulva is like going to burn for the rest of my life? Like
Mhm.
that was very shocking to me, especially because I was really young and it didn't make any sense. Like, what do you mean I just one day went to the bathroom and now my vulva hurts? And you're
Mm.
telling me that this is a chronic pain condition.
Mhm.
So, obviously, there was like a bit of a very unsettling or grieving period in there because, yeah, nobody wants to hear that, especially in in their 20s. But
Mhm.
I was like, okay, there has to be a solution for this. But the problem is that with Western medicine, what we hear is that there is no cure. So when you hear that and you don't fully understand what no cure means, it was very scary because they are saying that there's no solution for this. Whereas later on, I understood as I was going deeper into the topic that it just basically means there's not a treatment according Western medicine. So there's not like a pill or a surgery or anything validated that they can give to you to fix it, which
Mm.
does not mean it cannot be solved.
Mm.
So I kind of started like during my studies and studies, and in Spain what we do it's like already like our undergrad is already psychology, and so we have to already like do several research projects during it. So every opportunity that I had, I studied more like either chronic pain or vulvodynia because I'm like there has to be something for. And it's kind of when I started to see that there's like a lot of patterns that connect already with like a higher sensitivity, even with like certain personality types, and that in many cases there's been like a history of trauma, even things that we don't really maybe consider as trauma because it's not like big T trauma, but like a lot of like attachment issues. There's been like a lack of support in many cases. So yeah, when I was learning more about this, it's like, okay, so if this seems to be like a in large part driving this hypersensitivity of the nervous system and causing this, if we can like maybe reverse this, then the pain would go away. And that's exactly what happened, which I was very happy about. So this kind of how I got into the field of chronic pain, specifically neuroplastic pain, because could be also due to an injury, but that type of pain is like organic, it's justified. Whereas here it kind of came, let's say, out of nowhere, but there was something else underneath that needed to be tended to.
Yeah, I honestly see your story basically the same as mine. I think we talked about this when we first caught up, that we were similar ages, similar presentation, also studying psychology and health psychology, already having an interest in this, but also navigating a health condition and a diagnosis at the same time. So thank you for sharing, because that, I think, to me, that really just it really shows that these challenges that come up in our path, they also lead us to something so much greater than us, and happiness and peace and comfort on the other side as well. I would love to explore, if you're comfortable, a bit more about your journey. You were obviously navigating this chronic pain, and you realized and connected that there were some factors perhaps from your past that you were starting to understand influenced the pain and the sensitivity that you were experiencing. So can you share a little bit more what you connected for yourself and what you started to learn that was really changing how you approached the pain and your recovery?
Yeah, for my case, and I'm not saying it's always linked to sexual trauma, there was a lot of sexual trauma, which I do think had a massive impact. And I kind of kept pushing my body in situations that I just should have disengaged from. So in this case, it felt kind of like my body was kind of like screaming. So the first step for me was realizing that sometimes it was me that was abusing my own body by not setting the boundaries or disengaging from situations that I should not be in. And that was like a pretty rough wake up call, we could say, because we always think that abuse comes from the outside. And yes, there had been that too. But in the moment where I kept using my bodies in ways that it did not want to be used, that was on me.
Do you think that in that moment, because I had a similar realization, do you think that in the moment you were intimate or, not having the boundaries, do you think you realized you were doing it at the time, or was it more of a reflection that come further down the track of, I didn't know how to set boundaries, I didn't know that I wasn't ready, that kind of thing?
I feel there were both. I feel there were a lot of situations that I didn't even know how I could say no, or I didn't even know that it was okay not to do that just because someone else wants. And then there were situations that I do think I was a bit more aware and that I still pushed it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Hmm.
I understand. I understand. So the realization around boundaries and your part to play in listening to your body, what other moments did you have that started to see the pain wider than simply chronic pain?
Yeah. I feel I had not realized in how much fear I was living, like constant fear in my life, like a constant state of like hypervigilance, anxiety. And I feel that that's kind of like one of the first things that I came to realize, like, wow, like I didn't even know I was feeling fear, and it was actually here all the time, and that's why I had like panic attacks and all of that. Um, and I was not even looking at that. I just felt like I had to keep pushing. It was also like a very stressful period of my life. I was studying in the US, which was coming with its own set of challenges. So, yeah, just realizing that I had been living in fear my whole life. And it's like, I didn't even understand the concept that our body needs to feel safe. That was not even a thought for me. And now that, I feel safe majority of the time and that I'm like, good, I'm like, how did I live like that so many years? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that was absolutely insane and it's unsustainable. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is almost like the question in my mind is like, how did nothing really happen before? And yes, it was happening. Like, I already had chronic back pain, even as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I had anxiety my whole life and I had panic attacks. But, because it's like something that it's maybe not as clear as suddenly your vulva starting to hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I was not paying as much attention to it. And I just thought like, oh, I'm born like this. I'm just a person with anxiety. And then I realized that no, it was like the context that was creating that and that I was able to change the context and also change my own perception of the safety that I experience in my life and in my body.
So powerful. And you're so right about that. That if we live with something consistently from a young age, a mindset, or we're living constantly in that sympathetic fight or flight response, it becomes default. So it becomes normal. And often I feel like with people with chronic symptoms, because it's hard to avoid physical symptoms and they come on quite randomly, that can feel like the big wake up because everything else has just been so habitual and ongoing that it's become just like you said, not even a focus, just normalized. So, with like either
Hmm.
yourself or your clients, if someone's listening and they're like, how did you recognize that you were living in fear? And what did you actually start to do about that? Was that starting to witness your thoughts? Was it starting to think about and understand where your energy was going? How did you make that first step?
Mhm. I feel what I realized is that I had a lot of trouble kind of like being present in life and situations, even if they were not dangerous, let's say. Um, and it's kind of like a consistent feeling of like never really enjoying life. Life never seemed like nice or easy to me, and any stimuli, let's say, could like throw me off. So, for example, like when I was a teenager and I was in high school, my friends kind of like wanted to go outside and kind of like spend some time like yeah, just with the wind and the sunshine. And for me, it was like a lot. Like I much more preferred being indoors when I was younger because anything could feel like too much. Anything was like very overwhelming.
Mm,
And I think that one of the things that I first did was really kind of start noticing my body. I had been living really disconnected from my body and kind of almost like sheltering it and like creating this shield because everything felt like too much and just being able to be like, okay, what is happening? What is my body experiencing? How does this sensation feel? And kind of like, taking it from there and just like building maybe that muscle to kind of like expand the comfort in situations. And like now I love spending time outside. Like now I love being in nature. I love being in the sunshine.
mm,
But before it just felt like too much. So when I kind of created this capacity of just like being present with the sensations that are coming up and being like, okay, is this like, a pleasant stimuli or an unpleasant stimuli? What's really happening before? Because before anything, any stimuli was not welcome.
mhm,
Whereas now it's like I'm able to recognize like, oh, do I like this? No. Okay, why don't I like it? Okay, maybe this is too cold for me. Okay. So
mhm.
kind of like you're in tune with your body, you understand what is happening there. Whereas before I didn't really have any sort of awareness of what was happening
Sure.
yeah, inside.
No, I completely understand. And it's about creating, like you're saying, those moments of space to even check in and see, is this feeling good or safe or pleasurable versus fear, uncomfortable, I don't want to be here. I think if you've lived in a state of anxiety for a long time, it can feel quite confusing because your brain is often thinking about the next threat and it's protecting you and it's trying to
Mhm.
keep you safe. But simply by tuning into the sensations and creating a bit more space, even having the awareness that your brain is looking to protect you and it's become sensitive based on being so good at that over many years. And of course, me and you both know that often there is a reason for your nervous system
Mhm.
to become sensitized, and that can be through trauma, can be through early childhood experiences, attachment issues. It starts to make sense. And then we can be a lot more compassionate with the way that we treat ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I
Mm,
think that it's so good to kind of like see that you're not just like a weird kid, let's say, for having experienced that, that it's like a common experience or like that other people also feel that.
mm. I definitely agree around like the chronic symptoms or chronic illness personalities as well. And you probably see it a lot with your clients, but I think a lot of sensitive, I don't like labels, but people that tend to be more sensitive by nature or empathic can definitely tune into a lot more information. Of course, there's the perfectionists and the high achievers and those ones that are putting pressure on themselves in other ways. But all of these patterns we can change with awareness and tools as well. How long was it before you started noticing a shift in your physical symptoms?
Hmm. That's a question that I get a lot, or kind of like, when did you feel that you were cured? Because obviously, when my clients are in pain, they wanna know that. And I would say it was so subtle that I find it very hard to really kind of point at a certain time frame. What I do remember, to kind of give you a bit of a timeline, my pain started in February 2017. Then in mm, 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 must have been maybe October, November, or kind of like the end of 2018, I started seeing a therapist that also had like, an approach that really resonated with me, which was also like very somatic and integrative and all of that. And after that, in summer of 2019, I was able to walk and dance, and I was like, I still had pain, but it was quite all right. Whereas, what it had been like in 2017, 2018 was absolutely horrible. I could not wear panties, I could not wear pants, I could not sit, I could not walk.
This condition, guy, it's not a nice thing to have, and I've been there. It's truly heartbreaking as a woman, and I always like to emphasize this because it's not a condition. Vulvodynia is one that gets a lot of mentioning or talked about. It's becoming more common, but as a woman to experience consistent vulval pain, it impacts your intimacy, it impacts your relationships, your self worth, every single aspect of your life. So, thank you for sharing the reality of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is a great punctualization.
Mm,
So yeah, I don't really know exactly when it started to change, but at some point, a few months after, I was really like working on trauma, working with my body, working through like a lot of things. I feel
mm,
that, only a few months is like a pretty fast shift, taking into account that I had been in that pain for like 2 years, like consistent, really bad pain.
mm,
Um, so yeah, just being able to like walk and dance, like that was not even a thought. So yeah, by the summer of 2019, I was belly dancing and all of that, which was pretty cool. So yeah, cool because it was like a return to kind of like a bit of a more normalized life. And then in 20 beginning of 2020, so that was 3 years after my brain started, I was able to have sex again.
mm, mm,
And kind of like a while after, eventually I would consider myself fully cured, but I
mm.
can not say exactly when.
I think that also just shows for people listening that are moving through a recovery for anything that there are ups and downs and it is a process. It's not always linear. And I agree with that. Some people
Mhm.
have fast changes, others, it's a more gradual process and everyone's different. It sounds like your approach was quite holistic in the sense that you address some trauma from the past, you worked with the body, and I'm assuming understanding sensations in the body and how you were feeling. And I'm also guessing that you worked with the brain responding to pain with our thinking and changing it from fear into present moment as well. Would that be correct?
Yeah, 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 that is absolutely right.
Mm.
And one of the things that I noticed is that our own fear of the sensation and our own fear of the pain was kind of fitting into that loop, and that possibly could have reinforced the beginning of the vulvodynia because since it was like unknown and scary, and I was like already like so focused on it,
Mhm.
I feel that that really made the pain even worse. Whereas when we're able to like be like, okay, here there's a sensation, let's explore it with love, with compassion. Let's see what is happening, what message our body has for us. I do see that there's definitely a huge difference in how our body responds to that.
Mm, mm. I think you're very right about that initial fear. I also think that happens though because like I was similar in the sense I had these sensations, then I went to the doctors, they gave me some antibiotics for a potential urinary tract infection and they do the assessment. And then when the thing that's meant to work or you just think it's going to go away in a week, it doesn't go away, that's when the fear and the thinking and the
Yeah.
anxiety takes over. And there's nothing wrong with that, but with time and practicing those thoughts and that fear continually driving everything, that's when the brain pathways and the pain pathways become very strong. The sensations in the body become strong, and we've got an alarm system that's happening between the brain and the body.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it kind of reminded me what you say, that they give you like the medication for the UTI in your case, and that then it's like you kind of wait for a week and you're like, this should be done already. And then
Mhm.
it's kind of like when you're like, what is
What?
happening?
Yeah.
Because when you think it's an infection, you still kind of hold on to some hope.
Of course, like, they give you the
Yeah.
thrush cream or the UDI, even if you don't have any, evidence of infection, they're just, like, medical professionals are likely going to throw something in that region at you to hope that it's something like that, and I think everyone that's had some ongoing pelvic pain understands how complex it can be, because it's such an intricate area as well. It sounds like you had a real process of getting to comfort and then deciding to make this your life's work. Well, not only chronic pain, but psychology and helping people. Now that you work with a lot of
Mhm.
people, do you find that they have the same breakthroughs? Are you seeing specific things that people are like, that's what I needed to hear, or that's the realization that I needed?
Mhm. So I really like to use this kind of, let's say, somatic practice, or kind of like it allows us to dive into the subconscious and speak to the pain and speak to the body and see what's happening with that. And I feel that that's one of the things that gives people more insights, because the body's generally been trying to communicate with the person, is trying to say something,
Mm.
and most of us are ignoring it. So when we're actually directly speaking to it and we're getting responses, it's telling us why it's there, what brought it to be, like what's their message, and what it want us to do, how it's trying to help us by being there. And the moments that we take that in and start implementing those changes in our lives, very often the pain subsides because it doesn't have a reason to be there anymore. So I find that really cool. And I did not have that as a patient. That's something that I learned like a bit later on when I was already cured myself.
Mhm.
But yeah, I just realized that it gave like really good results. And now it's one of my favorite things, not only with vulvodynia, but with other conditions also, just being able to talk to the focus of the thing,
Mm.
even talk to like a certain emotion sometimes.
Mhm.
I do see that really helps people understand things a lot better. And when we have understanding, it's almost like we can feel more at ease
Mm.
because we realize that we're not being attacked It's just a message.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is the first step, is moving from something is happening to me and my body is broken, or there's an invader or an infection that's in my body, to it is a message, whether that be emotional, spiritual, how we're feeding our body. I'm curious, what is this like? Is it a process that you come up with? Is it something that you learned in one of your studies? Because I work a lot with the subconscious as well, but what does it involve?
hmm So I learned this from a practitioner, from one of the trainings that I took.
Hmm.
But it is also kind of like very similar in a way to Park's work. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Park's work or
Yeah,
IFS.
I do parts.
Um, okay, awesome. So I do feel there's like a big overlap in several of the techniques, and now I feel that I combine several things. And basically, kind of what you do is, yes, you induce this state of relaxation,
Hmm.
and you kind of try to imagine that part of the body. So you focus your attention in the somatic sensations, and then just imagine kind of like what comes up, which can be like a part of you just dressed differently, or it can be like a completely abstract object, and the funniest things can come up in there because it's like it can
The,
change so much from person to person.
yeah.
And then when we have this, it's kind of like, going and talking to this part of it. And it
Mm,
usually does give responses. So it's like, you go and you're like, I have some questions for you. Can you help me? And that's where you're asking, like, okay, kind of, why are you here? What's going on? What are you trying to tell me? And what do you want from me? What are the changes you are expecting from me?
mm,
And then it's kind of like, we thank this part of ourselves for the communication. And yeah, and usually like then we can ask also this part of us if it's able to change, if it's able to like maybe um become like a little bit softer or smoother. So
mhm,
depending on what it is, like a lot of people see like big like red spiky things, and then it
mm.
maybe just like decreases the color a little, goes into more like a pinkish, or instead of being so spiky, it just becomes like a softer ball or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then they also notice the change in the tissue, that it feels a bit different, like less painful or less tense. And yeah, it's generally like a very, but I would say gentle technique in a way, but also it's really powerful. So I really, really like this one.
Yeah, cool. It sounds basically the same as when I do parts work and people describe any kind of pain as sharp and red. And yeah, it's very interesting how the subconscious mind and how we relate to these symptoms starts, and how it can change a lot when we work with them in a really gentle way. One thing I want to also make a quick point on that you mentioned is the tissues can change, because there's a misconception sometimes with mind body illnesses. Something like vulvodynia, the tissue, the inflammation, the color of your skin, everything can shift. Even though it's got a mind body root, there can be changes in discharge, in skin color, in everything. And it's the same when people have back pain. It's the same when people have other types of pain. They say, well, yeah, but I've got this, like, I've got inflamed levels here, or I've got color changes. I'm like, that it still can be a mind body thing. People are so fixated on the physical, meaning it has to have a physical cure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mm, mm.
And they are so connected, right? One influences the other, because when our nervous system actually can relax, when our nervous system is not having to like, brace because it's like in a state of like freeze or in a state of fear, then all of those muscles and the fascia, the local fascia, is also able to kind of like relax a little bit more. And then
Mm,
we can get nutrients into that area. We can get the blood flow, we can get oxygen. And all of this brings the nutrients that affect the local tissue.
mhm.
So when something is very, very tense and there's not much irrigation in the area, that is going to change the color, the touch, the perception of it. Whereas when there is blood flow actually going somewhere, because the body is a bit more in an open state, that will also like affect and make it heal. So it's kind of like when you have a wound and your body is actually, doing its processes to heal the wound. So it's kind of a similar, we could say that it's happening in there when finally the blood flow is fully arriving to the area, nourishing the tissue, making it lubricate again. So yeah, it's not just one or the other, but they are working simultaneously, and working on one will affect the other.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an important thing for people to see and to understand, that it's not mind or body. They're always interconnected. You mentioned just then freeze response, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about the freeze response specifically, because I haven't spoken on it too much in this podcast. I do see a lot of women, mainly, that get into a freeze response. And I think a lot of people struggling with pelvic pain specifically have lived a long time in freeze response. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, very much. I would
Mm,
say I would say the majority. And I don't dare to say 100% just in case, but I would say yes, that the vast majority of people are living in that state.
mm. And a freeze response is a response in the nervous system where it's like one foot's on the accelerator and we've got that sympathetic activation, and the other foot is on the brake. So it's like you've got all this mobilized energy, you want to move, but the foot on the brake is like, I can't do anything. Possum in the headlights, essentially. So it's a very paralyzing state. How would you describe freeze to people that haven't heard about it before?
hmm I would say that freeze is like when your body has been like trying to run from a situation, and at some point it kind of feels helpless,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of just loses its energy to keep going and just brings you into the state of paralyzation because it feels helpless.
Mm,
And an example, for example, that I would give in nature is when like a gazelle or something is running away from a lion, and it feels that it cannot run away and that it's going to get caught, or like a zebra. Um, and the zebra is running, and at some point, like the lion is catching up to her, and then the zebra at some point kind of drops dead, quote
mm,
unquote, and it is its body went into freeze. And
mm,
then because it seems like it's dead, then this may actually prolong her life. So it's a state of survival, because
mhm,
then the lion doesn't feel it has to be chasing her. It's like, oh, it's already dead, so I can save this for later type of thing. And then
mhm,
eventually the zebra can run away. Whereas I feel that for us, what we feel is like we get stuck in there, and we're not like, oh, okay, the danger kind of has happened and this state of survival is no longer needed. We kind of just stay in there, which also could combine, I think, with a bit of that learned helplessness, but also because we have this part of our mind that does think and kind of keeps reinforcing where we are. And,
mhm,
there's differences between us and a zebra.
mhm.
So that's the way our nervous system responds to the situations. So that's kind of like how I like to look at it. Or sometimes to like make it a bit easier, I just give people like the analogy of an ice. It's like, you've been kind of like under a lot of stressors, kind of like, that have made you cool into this.
Mhm,
And now you're like a little ice, and you cannot just like expect to kind of flow freely from here and run freely as you were water. It's like you kind of need to let yourself melt and give yourself the space to kind of just like, be in tune maybe with the environment, and kind of like let that heat slowly get to you until you can unlock and unfreeze. So that would be like two analogies that I usually describe.
I think you made a really important point there, that it's actually a survival strategy from your nervous system. If you've been running or feeling like under threat for so long, eventually your body goes into to play dead as a way to conserve energy. There's no mistakes in the way that our nervous system operates. And I love the ice analogy. I'm like quite a visual person, and that to me just, it really shows that it's a gentle, slow approach to healing from a freeze response, which I've also learned, especially through moving through freeze in the last 5 years, some stuff I've been navigating, it's not an all or nothing approach, because you're literally going to loop yourself back into a freeze state. And women, especially women that are very critical on themselves, women that experience a lot of shame, I think there's this perpetual loop of freeze, and then they try and critique themselves into more change. And that doesn't work. It has to be a gentle, like you said, melting approach, or even a body-based approach where you're slowly finding space in your body again.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I think that a lot of us, what we do is like we try to push past that and keep going. And then I feel that it kind of backfires and the symptoms get worse because it's like, no, I'm trying to tell you to do completely the opposite instead of pushing through, which then it's something that we usually need to learn how to do.
Yeah, I know. And I've said this on so many podcasts, most people that are comfortable or have their energy again, if they've had like a fatigue condition, they realize that to get to that point, it requires self-compassion and a whole shift in energy. You are not going to heal in the same energy that you got sick in. It's basically impossible. That is the message from the body. So if you've been showing up a certain way, symptoms can be an alarm to ask you to start responding differently. About freeze and the clients that you work with, what would be your top 1 or 2 things that you give them to start to practice to move out of this state?
I would just ask them to start noticing the sensations on their body.
Mm.
So to actually tune in, because very often what they want to do is tune out and dissociate from their bodies. So kind of just like, lay down, take it slow, notice what you feel, where do you feel it, in which areas do you feel there's more tensions, what sensations are coming up for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel that that's kind of like a way to start bringing some awareness. And over time, when we have practiced this long enough, it happens more automatically, and it doesn't have to be such a conscious process. But I do feel that at the beginning, you really need to pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's an interesting one, especially with chronic pain. Noticing sensations, because people who have chronic pain conditions are so good at judging and intellectualizing and checking in on symptoms. But I think if you're starting to notice other sensations in your body, other things that feel spacious, other things that feel good, or like you said, for some people, it is tuning into the tension, but it's being present with it rather than having like the spiraling thoughts and attaching the stories, so that you're creating like a safety signal to your brain of like, it's okay to be here, without looping and spiraling and judging and anticipating and all the other things that the brain is really good at when there's pain that is there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I
Mm.
find that sometimes, like, even labeling things of kind of what's happening is like an easy way, because if you just kind of tell people to have their mind still, it's so hard. But when you're kind of maybe talking to yourself and you're like, oh, I feel some tension in my abdomen. Okay. And now I'm feeling some heat maybe on kind of like around my shoulder blade or something like that. So kind of
Mm.
like you're talking to yourself, describing what is happening. And
Mm.
then like your mind is active, which is then preventing it from like spiraling because you're using it for something.
Mhm.
But you're still focused on the body. But yeah,
Mhm.
when you said like the spiraling thing, like I wanted to comment on this because it's like, it's good to actually be, let's say, using the mind, but use the mind to be in the body, because otherwise it's so easy to completely go in a different direction. And next things you know, you're thinking about your grocery shopping list or something completely unrelated because your mind is just like going through the motions.
Yeah, of course. And, if people are listening and they're like, I don't know how to do this, then that is what me and Miriam both can teach. So, yeah, make sure you get support with this, because it's totally normal, especially if you're dealing with chronic symptoms, to be so detached from any like feelings or understanding any of this in the body. So this conversation might be a little bit like, this feels out of reach, or I don't really know what you're talking about. But as you start to practice it more, it becomes a lot more easier to understand. If I'd heard this conversation like years and years ago, I would have just probably been like, I don't know what they're talking about. It's interesting to think about how much you learn once you're on the other side and once you are experiencing comfort again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any other things that really resonate with your clients, things that you share with them that really help them come back to that place of safety? It could be self-compassionate talk. It could be thinking about what they want rather than trying to avoid pain. Is there any other conversation you would like to speak into?
Those things that you mentioned, they are both super, super important, which I think that our work must definitely go like in similar lines in this case,
Mm-hmm.
because of what you're saying, it's definitely completely resonates. I think that self-compassion is a huge one, because there is so much blame and shame and thinking that you're broken and thinking that you're weak and all of this. Whereas when you try to, treat your body as something that just needs some love and that's been trying to alert you of things happening, I think that that's really important. And one of the things that my clients say is that through me offering compassion to them, they learn how to give it to themselves, which I think that it's really beautiful. And on the other hand, it makes me think that very often we are not surrounded by people that knows how to offer us compassion, which that then probably also creates part of the problem, because we all need that softness, that gentleness, somebody that is not making us feel like we're failing or that we're doing something wrong, but just somebody that is being like very understanding
Mm.
and, you know, honoring all parts of us. So on the one hand, it's like, I love that they get to learn this. On the other hand, I'm like, well, it seems that the fact that they are not getting this, it is a part of the problem and kind of speaks about the current society in a way.
Mm. That's such a good point to make. I actually never really thought about that before. I do think a lot about how people say they don't know how to be compassionate, and it feels like a foreign language that you're learning. It's like, yeah, self-compassion, cool, but what do I even say? Like, where do I start?
Yeah.
And like Miriam saying, maybe thinking about and connecting into people that show you compassion or that you show compassion, like your kids or your animals, and thinking about how you speak or are spoken to in that respect, and then starting to apply that to yourself. It can be uncomfortable and challenging at the start, but it's actually just taking it from one context to the next. But you're so right. I mean, especially if you're raised with critical parents and a society that expects so much output and productivity and, standards, beauty standards, like us comparison, there's even just the climate of today, this constant being on and not feeling enough, not doing enough. You have to actively work on your relationship with yourself and the way you slow down and the way you connect to yourself. That's an act of self-love. I think it's like the most important thing we can do is create that space in today's world.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that you mentioned self-love, sometimes like when this topic comes up and I'm like, how are you taking care of yourself? A lot of them kind of tell me like practices that they are doing, but not the very foundation of it. So they are like, oh, I take a bath or I do this. And I'm like, yeah, no, those are great, do them. But that's not really taking care of yourself in the sense like you keep overextending yourself. You keep doing things you don't want to do. You have sometimes like a mother that is, in some cases, I would say very manipulative, and you're still pandering to her. So no, taking care of yourself means that you also recognize that your needs are important. And I'm not saying that we need to shift into like a complete individualism where only our needs matter, but there has to be a balance where we can look after ourselves, we can set our boundaries when we need to. And yes, then we can show up for others and look after others and help others in the same way we want them to show up for us. But
Mm,
what I find is that there's a complete lack of balance with these people that they are very rarely the receiving, but
Mm,
they keep overextending themselves for others consistently, so they end up depleted. And it's like, no, no, you need to change the foundation. Not, I'm just going to do everything everybody wants and then just go take a bath and hope that everything will be okay. Like, mm-mm.
so true. That's such a good point, because it's like energy in, energy out. People add more and more to their self-care list or to-do list, but it's another activity you're doing rather than actually assessing and auditing your energy and what feels good and what is actually draining you. Because otherwise it's like a never ending thing of like, oh, I should have the bath because I know that's what I'm meant to be doing for healing, and I should, do 5 minutes of breath first thing in the morning, whatever it is, and you're adding it, but you're not looking at all these like leaky holes in your bucket that are actually draining your resources and still keeping your
Yeah.
body stuck in that stress response. I think for people that have learned to stay safe over their life by giving, by being the kind person, by over extending, that is the hardest work. It's actually to start asking yourself, what do I need? Where do I need to set
Yeah.
boundaries? It's uncomfortable, but part of getting well is uncomfortable. It's not doing more things, it's tuning back into what you actually need. And like you said, balancing it. People have this fear of becoming selfish if they've been operating like that for so long, but that's what you cannot pour from an empty cup.
Yeah. Mhm. Sometimes you have to go through like time of selfishness and just like looking after yourself. It is very hard to get into a balanced state
Mm,
very quickly. So sometimes you need to go through the phase of like, I am looking after my needs now. And then when you're good, when you have the energy, when you have the resources, and when you actually know how to navigate relationships and healthy boundaries, then you can create like this space, as I was saying, of like, we're showing up mutually. But in many cases, that also means you're going to lose and change a lot of friendships because people that are used to just like overgiving may not like that version of you that is no longer doing that. But I
mhm,
would say it's a win because
yeah,
then you end up like with more people that also want to be there for you that you can go to. So I feel that a lot of these women, and it happened to me, and partly that made me become a therapist, but I was like everybody's therapist. Everybody would come to me with their problems. I would help everyone. I would always have support and advice for others. But then sometimes you need something and you realize that other people are not there for you.
mm,
And it is a hard realization. And thankfully this has not been the case for many years now. But I do think that that part of my life really primed me to become a therapist because I was already becoming everybody's therapist.
you were attuned to everyone else.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think
Mm.
that it's very good to kind of make that shift and actually get good people in your life that also want to take care of you.
Yeah, and it also relies on us or people that have been in those
Yeah,
over responsibility roles or feeling like they're the one holding the emotional weight for everyone else. It requires a level of self honesty to actually say, I can't operate like this anymore. Even if you know the people around you can't,
yeah,
maybe they're not in a
mm,
space to step up. It's first about being honest with yourself and what you need, and actually seeing yourself deserving of receiving that love and support, or at least taking a step back.
yeah,
I wanted to quickly also speak on,
mm,
just resonated with that point of really focusing and getting a picture of what we want rather than avoiding what we don't want, especially when it comes to chronic pain. Because I think a lot of people,
yeah,
when I first work with someone and I'm like, so what do you want? And they're like, I don't know, I just don't want to be in pain anymore. Or I don't want to live like this. But there's no language and there's no image and there's no anything to feel into and describe what they want. And partly that's probably due to fear of like, I've had my hopes up in the past and it's not turned out the way I want. Also, because if you're living with symptoms for so long, that becomes your main focus. So it's really hard to connect into what you actually want, which, in our case, it would have been comfort, it would have been ease, it would have been, um, boundary setting, it would have been confidence, all these sorts of things. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Very often when I ask, kind of like, what do you want? It's, I just don't want to have pain. And it's like, okay. And what happens after that? But yeah, it is usually a big struggle for people to see anything beyond, just getting rid of the pain. Yeah.
Mm. So
Mm.
I think, again, if you're listening to this episode and you're just in that recovery phase, you're dealing with any kind of chronic symptoms, I would encourage you to get some language, get some words. You can literally use ChatGPT if you want to start to formulate and get a picture of the type of person you want to become. That could be just words like comfort, energy, vitality, or you could get more descriptive and start to describe how they'll be waking up, what their focus will be on, what people were saying back, if it's you, back to you, how you're dressed, how proud of you are, because that's starting to form a picture and it's starting to give the brain an image that it can work towards. I think this is really important. So often we know what we don't want, but we don't take enough time and energy to focus in on what we do want. I think that's something practical that
Mm.
people start to do.
I would add to what you were saying that I feel, at least in my experience, what it seems that a lot of people struggle with is that they want to continue being the same version of themselves simply without pain, which then that makes it very hard for them to visualize something else. And we both know that becoming free of pain means becoming another version of yourself and operating differently. But they don't want to have to take those steps and make those changes because that's really scary and that can be very overwhelming. So it's like, no, no, I just want to be me. Just take this pain away. And it's like, no, what happened is that you outgrow the pain by becoming another version of you. And this version of you does things differently. And that's why she doesn't have pain. But I think that that's like one of the main points of friction, kind of not wanting to become something else.
That, what you just said, is, I think, out of this whole conversation, the most important thing, because you are so right in that we expect things to just disappear with no discomfort, no questioning, no looking at our part to play, because that is the model that we've been grown up on. That is the medical model of there will be a fix and then we'll be back on track. And yes, for some people they actually might have that experience with certain conditions and things, but I think if you look at it in a way that, as the person going through symptoms, that you've got some influence and you're going to come out the other side as a even better version of yourself. Maybe not the same, because people have rose tinted glasses and they often think like, I just want to be like how I was last year before this all started. If you actually go back to then and you sit with that and you really think about what was maybe going on or how you were dealing with stress or what pressure you put on yourself, I think most people, if they sat with that long enough, they wouldn't want to go back there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, because it feels familiar. It's easier than, going into something unknown, even though it could be better. But I feel that that process of transformation is like something that a lot of people want to avoid.
Yeah, I agree.
But
And
also
that's
that's why we do this work, right? So that people don't have to do it alone. Mm.
totally, but I think it is sad because, especially in the terms of vulvodynia, there's probably not many conversations out there like this. If you go onto the support groups and you go onto, Facebook and that kind of thing, people aren't having these types of conversations. So hopefully the right people hear these conversations and it gets them thinking. It's not easy. It's not something that's a walk in the park, but I and you both know that it's possible. And that's something, hope is something that often you're not given if you're just taking a conventional approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that.
I would love to ask you a little bit more about, I think you're writing a book, is that correct? Coming up?
Yep, that's right.
Are you happy
Mhm.
to share a little bit about that, or at least when it will be ready if someone's listening and they would love to learn more about when it's out there?
Yeah. So I wanted to have it published by this month, but I'm in the editing process. And it is a short book. It's meant to be like very informational and kind of like going straight to the point and speaking about the main factors that play into vulvodynia and kind of how to go about it. So, it is pretty straightforward. It's probably going to be named All I Wish I Had Known About Vulvodynia.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm still like editing, and I do want to have it out by October or so,
Mm.
but it might take a little bit more time. But yeah, I will have it posted whenever it's ready in my Instagram, the Vulvodynia Therapist. That's where I update mostly about vulvodynia things. My main Instagram, I kind of use it for other topics these days.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'm kind of giving updates in there, kind of like, okay, I'm just editing now. I'm in the final stretch. So hopefully will be out soon. But yeah, just gotta make sure that everything is coherent right now.
Of course, it's a massive undertaking. Even if it's a small book, I still think good on you for like putting these concepts and ideas out there. It takes a lot of backing yourself, a lot of courage. And like you said, you do a whole lot of other work as well. So it's not just pain focused. I feel like there were so many other conversations we could have talked on today, more generally speaking. But it's so nice to connect with someone who's had such a similar experience. And I know it's like a very niche kind of idea we've gone into. Maybe you can come back for another episode and we can talk more about your other work as a psychologist. If people are wanting to find you, Miriam, can you just share your Instagram details? I'll put them in the show notes for anyone listening. But yeah, please share any of your details or how people can work with you as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So usually they can find me on my Instagram. It's Miriam Provenzano, or for work specific to Vulvodynia, the Vulvodynia Therapist. So yeah, if you reach me there, I'm easy to find on Instagram.
Awesome.
Thank you, Bianca.
Thank you so much for this conversation. It was lovely to connect.
Thank you. It was really good to talk to you too.
Have a good week, everyone. See you next time.